So it has been 2 weeks, or at least 2 weeks since our last council meeting. And I just wanted another opportunity to say how grateful I am for our staff through the Nippon incident, because we've had this conversation. There was two incidents occurring: what was happening with the families, the recovery, the response, as well as what was happening on the water side, and kind of working through communication tactics, working together with our partners, CDID, all of the alphabet soups of the EPA, that and everybody in between with that. And it's been incredible, even just the conversations. Things like that don't happen successfully if relationships aren't already built. It was a terrible thing that could have gone much worse without that coordinated effort. And so I'm just extraordinarily impressed with our staff, both who are here working to keep the city operating, as well as those who are working through Nippon and through that response. And so it's just been impressive, and we're already having conversations on how we could do things better, what the future looks like, where we can go with that. And so I just wanted to again reiterate the gratitude and the impressiveness of our staff. And then tonight we have 4 items under city manager's report. The first is Hope Village. I do have a verbal report. It's just on along the things that were attached to the agenda. Happy to give that if that you would like, but we don't have a slide show for the evening.
Any questions to what we read in the agenda? I do think the staff is looking for direction, if desired. Otherwise, it will stay status quo until we tell them otherwise. Is there any direction that we'd like to give?
I'm going to make this motion very reluctantly, but I think I move that we go ahead and proceed with surplusing the properties at Hope Village with 2 caveats. That one, that we give local nonprofits and or religious organizations at least a first crack at those things, and that any proceeds received be used for aiding the homeless population in our community.
I'll second.
Can you explain kind of what your thoughts are on that first one? What do you mean by nonprofits and faith? They would purchase it from us, and
yes.
Could we include like other cities or?
I would prefer to give local religious nonprofits the first crack at it if they so choose. Largely to, again, if they believe that that's part of their missionary work or their whatnot, I would at least like to make sure that they're giving that opportunity to fulfill their mission in the community.
Mr. Collins, I'd like to put you on spot, if at all possible, with regard to our surplus policy and what that may or may not look like regarding legality, or maybe Charlotte as well.
Yeah, so that will be something we'll have to run by legal and see what we can actually do and put parameters around that. But our surplus policy, we'd be bringing back a resolution to surplus those assets. And we have a little bit of time. We can work through that with Charlotte.
I think if we understand kind of the want, we can bring back something that's filtered towards that. So
absolutely, yeah.
Okay. And then my second question about like the proceeds, I think it seems appropriate. I wonder if maybe homeless is not the right term. Could it also include housing or?
Well, I would certainly be more interested in the transition from homeless to housing rather than the concept of housing in general, if that's understood. Meaning, at some level, the way I kind of look at Hope Village was, at some level, it's a transition to housing. And so my reaction is, when I talk about homeless, I want to make sure that we're giving or creating those opportunities for that transition to happen.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mike, in your mind, would BHU fall into maybe good use of funds, because they're the ones interacting and pointing them towards services and helping them get to where they need to be?
Largely because I think it has its own independent funding. I would probably not be putting it there. Where I would see maybe the greater need is in vouchers, in some type of, well, called bridge assistance to getting people launched into their housing. But if
So
that makes sense.
one of the things, and maybe Charlotte can speak to this, but it would have to be something that's within our purview, like a gift of public funds to an outside agency. I think you'd have to look at a BHU, potentially maybe the connection we have with HOSWA, things that are already in place. I think I said BHU, but I think we can bring back a proposal with some, if that's the thought on where those go. I think that would be just a council direction, and I think we can work through that.
Councilmember Bryant.
Might I suggest a friendly amendment to Mr. Claxton's motion that's been seconded in two, I'm hearing two parts. I'm hearing one is let's assess the value of the property. And two, let's determine what to do with the proceeds of those funds. Am I understanding the motion correctly, the two parts?
I think I understood it, not necessarily like the value, but probably getting the most value, but prioritizing local first and then working backwards from there. That's kind of how I took it. I saw Attorney Archer had her hand up. Do we need to go into executive session or?
No, I think we can actually do exactly as City Manager Wills has been describing. We can look into the parameters that are established by this motion and try to come back with something that fits those parameters. There are limitations, as you're all aware, with regards to surplusing. And the standard is we must do so in a commercially reasonable manner. But there are carve-outs to that standard for transfers to other governmental agencies. I'm not aware of transfers to non-governmental agencies triggering that carve-out, but there may be other partnerships that we could investigate for the council and brief at the next meeting.
I'll just provide my opinion on the motion at the table. Actually, go ahead, Councilmember Kendall, you go first.
Thank you. I've gone through a lot of thought in this process. This is probably the standing up Hope Village was, I think, my proudest moment on council. And I think it was a very difficult decision to do that, to set up Hope Village, but I think it was amazingly successful. And I'm so proud of the people that have been helped with that. I spent time a few weeks ago with our community outreach coordinator, and I can see the improvements in I truly felt like we had an emergency at that point in time when we first stood up Hope Village, and we are clearly past that. We've reached the tipping point to the better. So I'm in one way, I'm not certainly not advocating for the city to get involved with Hope Village or to something like Hope Village again. I did really appreciate the communication that we got this week from Reverend Liz Carney and the research that she did on the concerns that expressed by the various churches around the community about the increases that they're seeing in the food insecurity and housing insecurity with people in our community. So I'm concerned that this is an asset that I am uncomfortable getting rid of. And I would like to see possibly offering the village, Hope Village set up intact to, doing RFP to see if there's some organization that would like to figure out how to run it, figure out how to fund it, and utilize the asset in place as a first option to kind of, as opposed to selling it to an organization within the community, say, hey, you can use this or this asset if you can figure out a way to help address some of these issues in the community.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not going to vote for the motion that Councilman Claxton made. I think it's difficult for me to know that a lot of people in the community sacrificed a lot when Hope Village and Camp Alabama were there. It wasn't the fact that, I don't know, I just feel like a lot of people were impacted by it, whether it be good, bad, or indifferent. And so to be able to tell the community, the neighbors that also were impacted in a negative way, that whatever results and funds we get from this, it's going to go back to the just one sector. I'm not comfortable with that at all. I think this whole community support, for the most part, supported it. So there were challenges, but for us to be able to take those funds and give them right back to a sector, I think is wrong. Because I think we all should benefit from that as taxpayers, whatever revenue comes from it. I definitely don't agree. We gave people the ability to send in an RFP if they were interested in taking it over after Salvation Army. We got one RFP. They weren't eligible at the time. And so I am not in favor of reopening the RFP process again to keep that going. I feel like it's the city's responsibility at this time. We gave millions to Hope Village, and we have had great results in housing them. So I'm very proud of where we're at, and I think we're at that crossroads now. Let's make a decision on what we're going to do. There's a huge part of me that wishes that Councilman Claxton would have brought up this maybe to Jen or to Charlotte prior to the meeting, and maybe they could have came back with maybe some of the answers. But now we're just going to kick it down the road a little bit longer now. And I feel like at some point, as you stated, when is a good time? Well, it's been a good time for this council to make a decision. And now we're kicking it down the road again. So we can't say, let's not kick it down the road or whatever you had stated the time is now. The time is now for us to make a decision. This has gone on way too long, I think, not just for me, but for the community. I think we have enough information. We've opened up the RFP. I don't think we should earmark and designate funds from Hope Village to a particular sector when the whole community was a part of it.
Yes. Have you already spoke to your motion yet? No. Okay, go ahead.
And I'm going to apologize. I think that when we went through the last council meeting, I think that I was very clear that I think that we have 1/3 of our voting population that is very adamant about one thing, a 1/3 population that is the diametric opposite on it. And what I'm going to I'm going to get back to this, and I apologize because I'm going to speak probably a lot longer than most people ever want me to speak, but I feel that my burden is much heavier. My burden is much heavier than many at the table here. And my concern has always been that we talk past each other and that we have one wall that I will call the never wall. And then we have another wall that says the not now wall. And I'm going to come back to that, but part of the thing is that when I go through, and I want to say that I just have an immense amount of pride for our city. But my pride for the city never began with Hope Village, and it never ends with Hope Village. And part of the reason I couldn't do it last time was for me to get, and Charlotte, if you want to tell Chief Huda to activate the taser at any point when I talk about this, please do so. But for me, the burden was never a preponderance, that it was just likely a better outcome or anything along those lines. When we're talking about the most, I will say, compelling issue that City Council has had to grapple with over the last decade, it is about homelessness. It is about housing. And so for me, the burden has always been clear, cogent, convincing. And I'm sorry, Chief, you did not meet that burden at that last meeting. I think your narrative is largely correct. And if I thought at that time that the burden was just a preponderance, I would have voted with Mr. Halverson, Mayor Halverson, my apologies. I would have done that. I'm also, and this is going to be a slight admonishment to the city manager. This was an issue that really probably should have been addressed by you and not the police chief. because I think that when it gets told by the police chief, we're acting as though homelessness is an issue of crime. And in some way, we color the message by who our messenger is. So again, you're a nice guy. Okay, let's just put it out there. You're a nice guy. But my reaction was, it sort of kind of colored my reaction. But the other thing I kind of went through in terms of that Hope Village presentation is the tone was always wrong. It was always wrong when we talked about this because, in essence, we're not talking about this in a way. Yeah, and this is no hang up on staff and that sort of thing. I mean, they performed the task that council asked them to do, which is what to do with Hope Village. But for me, the bigger picture, but if I can convey a clear, cogent, convincing evidence, if it isn't about Hope Village and what to do with it, maybe I can tell a clear, cogent, convincing story about why we should be proud of our community. I kind of go back in terms of, if you go back long enough, much of our homeless issue arose out of the great financial crisis of 2008 and the foreclosures that basically put a bunch of people out on the street. You Google or go back on Daily News archives, you will find City Council was talking about this same issue for the better part of a decade, even before we got into Hope Village. And what I would say kind of goes like this, and part of the reason, again, no apologies to Chief Huda, but City Council approaches this an all sticks, no carrots kind of approach. I would call it our sticks and stones may break some bones, but it sure did nothing about the homeless. And I would say that basically the situation kept getting worse and worse and worse. And I kind of go through, and I don't talk about religion on my sleeve very much, but if you want to know about a moment when I found God, it really had to do with the financial crisis. And there's going to be a concept, words I'm going to throw out here that are going to make no sense to anybody, but it shapes my thinking. It is so very important to have counter-cyclical federal fiscal policy when monetary policy is constrained by the zero lower bound. Granted, means nothing to you folks. But what it does say is when there's a crisis around and the Federal Reserve can't lower its damn interest rate lower than zero, getting federal help at a time of crisis is so very important. But you know what's more important? Having a community that recognizes that it has a problem and is willing to accept that help. That is a skill that we all should foster and learn among ourselves. That we see that we need help, we will accept help. Now, this is kind of going back into, I'm going to lead into my narrative, which kind of goes like this. I think until 2021, this was again an issue that was getting worse and worse and worse. But starting in 2022, some magic was starting to happen in our community. Magic was happening in our community. And when we stop and basically, look at the situation as it existed at the end of 2021, we were a community that, sure, we could yell, we could swear, but we couldn't breathe. We couldn't breathe. And at that time, we got some important opportunities to receive federal funding that basically paid for Hope Village, that covered its costs for the first 3 years of its operation, by and large. And I am so grateful that we had a city council that basically said, we know that we have this issue. We need some help and we are willing to accept help. That's Hope Village. But part of the reason I kind of go through and I say, I don't want it to be a law enforcement issue. This was really a whole of Longview issue where, quite frankly, I saw city council work magic. Okay. One, starting in, I kind of go through and I put in my timeline, calendar of events. Hope Village was opened in 2022. The police department began in cooperation with the Columbia Wellness, its behavioral health unit. Then in 2023, incorporate that within the police unit. Longview adopts codes concerning accessory dwelling units because we realize it does no good to, in essence, keep shaming and arresting homeless people if they have no place to go. The accessory dwelling units legislation was part of moving that. And that's kind of, again, the story I want to make sure that we understand. In 2023, the council did something else that was genius. It adopted the HOSWA sales tax. Actually, in the way it works, I don't believe it costs us any more, but we get to bring those dollars home. We get to create affordable housing units for our residents, for those who need it. We're creating opportunities to, in essence, meet people where they are, give them housing. We adopted cottage housing ordinances, which gave density bonuses. Again, we're meeting people where they're at, meeting their needs. The use table changes in the planning map, and I'll let Nick Little talk about that. It's above me. It basically allowed multifamily in mixed-use commercial industrial districts. Again, creating opportunities for housing. What do we do with a homeless individual to make sure that they don't that they have housing? And that is probably the biggest thing that you can do when it comes to, in essence, addressing the homeless issue, making sure that they have housing. But wait, there's more. In 2024, the therapeutic courts were, in essence, brought forth by the city council. Again, part of the reason I don't necessarily, again, when I talk about, the 3 E's and that sort of thing, what I would probably also say is the police and the courts have evolved in their thinking in how they deal with the homeless. And therapeutic courts are part and parcel of that success story of how we triage individuals who are homeless to try and figure out how we do something to get, in essence, out of that cycle. We had a shared driveways ordinance. And then basically in 2025, we saw the adoption of a short subdivision ordinance and a multi-unit overlay. Again, creating more housing. This is an example of the whole city council, the whole of city, coming together to work on an issue. And when I kind of go through that, that builds an enormous amount of pride in me, because I think that we are here today because of the good work of city council and city staff in addressing a real need. I think that we are a leader in the state, maybe even nationwide, in terms of how we have addressed this issue. I'm exceptionally proud of that. But part of the reason I want that RFP to include something about that homeless issue is, as Chief points out the last time, I'm not so bold to ever say that our homeless issue is solved today. But I do think that we still need to find some way to, in essence, help these individuals get accommodated. The money that came in, we were blessed with from federal stimulus dollars. But part of the reason I'm kind of willing to let it go, if I have the understanding and support of council to, in essence, continue our efforts for those homeless individuals, is because I think right now Hope Village is not the right solution to the problem that we have right now. I listened to the May 7th presentation. There is clearly a need for transitional housing. the other thing I was left with was, in essence, from the May 7 meeting of the nonprofits, is 50 units is clearly too many units. The number that I heard, or that stuck with me, ironically, was the number 24. And I'm going to kind of go through and tell you why I think that number is important to me. I did have a conversation with Councilmember Kendall, who pointed out Vancouver, which operates outside in. They operate 4 20-unit shelters, not unlike ours. Number 20 becomes very important to me because, in essence, Vancouver is more than 4 times larger than us. And that was also what told me that, not that Vancouver has the perfect answer, but it told me 50 was too many. The other thing I kind of go through in terms of this was, and again, I'm going to let Charlotte cue Chief Huda to zap the taser on me if I get outside my lane here. At the end of the day, we have to understand Hope Village is not housing. It is probably not even what I would call shelter. Statutorily, or what we have in terms of our existing realm. Vancouver, I think what they do is, in essence, they deem those types of structures as, I'll call it, an iron tent or a camper that never moves. They create they say they ban camping, but they basically create a certain safe campground area. And I'm not certain that, again, that right now that it's the correct solution for the problem that we have or the problem that we may face in the future. The reason I make the motion that I did was because this is and has been a very difficult journey for me. And I think for many in the community to get where we are today. And because I recognize that there is still homelessness in our community, and I don't expect that the surplus funds will raise a ton of money, I would at least like to have the comfort of knowing that we helped some vulnerable individuals that are still facing the issue. Part of the other reason I kind of go through is that when I talk about the never wall, there is that not yet wall. And what happens is the rationale that we never pull the plug on Hope Village is because now is not the right time to do it. And I recognize that sometimes if you are so rigid on the never end, you allow a lot of suffering of people because you never allow aid to come in. And the most important thing that you can have with that never door is a never wall is a door. That when aid is offered to our community, we are willing to say close enough and let the aid in so that we don't cause unnecessary suffering. But there is another thing that I worry about in terms of the not yet, not now is not the time wall. Because at some level, it insists upon a level of perfection that we never achieve. Because if you ask, if now is not the right time, when is it? And the answer becomes never. And ironically, you end up with basically mirror images of the same wall. Never allow aid in, never let aid go by. And the one thing I do talk about in terms of John Maynard Keynes, and this is the reason why I found God, was because of a gay British economist. But the fact of the matter is, one of the things he says is, during a time of a storm, to satisfy yourself that in the long run, things will work out, you allow a lot of suffering to go through, happen. But when the storm passes, even if it's not completely over, it's time for us to continue our journey. And the way I look at it is, it's time for us as a community to continue our journey. I'm always proud of the work that the city did. If we kind of, I realize I'm too loud, but the fact of the matter is, what I saw emerge from our city between that 2022 year period and continuing on today is a city that grapples with tough issues, finds solutions, is bold and innovative in how we address these things. And this is something that, again, that's my source of pride. My pride never began with Hope Village. It will never end with Hope Village. So again, I apologize for going way too long on this, but again, it has been a difficult journey for me, recognizing that there is still a significant community out there that still needs help. Thank you.
Thank you for the thoughtfulness there. Go ahead, Councilmember Nichols.
My comments will be a little simpler than that. Could you read the motion back again?
To proceed with surplusing the properties at Hope Village and give local nonprofits and religious organizations first opportunity, and any proceeds be used for aiding our homeless population.
Thank you. I've been wrestling with this issue for quite a while, like everybody else has. I am cognizant of and sensitive to our service organizations' concerns and our religious organizations' concerns about the fact that we may have a storm coming. It may be getting worse again. We don't know that. I've had a bit of a context shift in the way I feel about this issue. Mostly that is based on talking to staff, talking to LPD, and doing 3 ride-alongs with BHU, Behavioral Health Unit, who do marvelous work. I tend to agree with Councilmember Lefebvre. We've wrestled with this for a long time. I've been through the workshops. We've been through the RFP process. I haven't heard anybody come back with a workable plan for this. I say this with some trepidation, but I believe it's time to surplus those units. And my preference would be, if we can, to funnel those proceeds to avenues that are already established, as Mr. Young mentioned, and that are already working, primarily BHU unit. The more money we can fund to some of those programs that are actually making a difference, I think we're putting the best foot forward. So I'm in favor of surplusing the units.
Anyone who hasn't spoken yet, I think it's just, do you have any comments or should I go? All right. Yeah. Thank you for your thoughtfulness. I can tell that you put a lot of work into wrestling with that. So thank you. My comments to the motion are, and I'll break it into the 2 parts. So surplusing, first part, designated for local nonprofits, faith. I question if that is the best use for these purposes, considering locally we don't have an emergency and we've grappled with the emergency declaration, but there are other cities that do have active emergencies that could use it. So maybe we don't just surplus them off one at a time for chicken coops, but maybe there's a city out there in Washington, perhaps, that could use 24, and a different city that could use 24, or a city that can use all 50, that isn't an active emergency, and then they can follow up with other ordinance changes. Because I do agree, I think we've done a good job, and councils previous to mine have done a good job in setting up these zoning changes to allow for more property rights and flexibility on your own property. So of that first portion, first dibs to nonprofits and churches. I don't know if it's feasible, and I would lean more towards surplusing, seeing if there's any cities, municipalities out there that could use, ideally, the whole 50 and make it easy for us, or a couple chunks of the 50, and then work our way down from there, surplusing in lots of 10 or whatever we have to do to make it easier for our staff. The second part of it with like, what do we do with the money? I think via HUD dollars that we've distributed last meeting before. I always enjoy reading those applications to see what's out there, seeing Salvation Army needing an upgrade to their elevator, or Community House on Broadway needing updates to their staircases. I think that's a good fund for those dollars, and that's what those dollars are purpose built for. These dollars were revenue replacement via ARPA funds. So our federal government gave the city revenue replacement into our general fund. So then I'm thinking, okay, general fund dollars, what could we use that for? What should that be used for? And I think general fund, we saw a pie chart at the Longview 101 of where our general fund dollars go, public safety, taking up a large majority of that. Well, what's in public safety, BHU? So I'm also kind of in the camp of the true use of those dollars. And this is the capital dollars were the ARPA funds from the federal government, and the operating was the state funds through Department of Commerce. These were general fund dollars. Should we divert them into other fund sources like HUD, or other sources like the 0.1% HOSWA that we currently have? So my preference would be, yeah, let's earmark those dollars, but within the general fund. That maybe there's some general fund capital things that are adjacent to kind of that mission, and I am certainly I could sympathize earmarking something in the general fund, but just straight giving vouchers out, I don't know, like hotel vouchers, I'm not sure I'm on board with that, with the general fund dollars. But those are my comments on the motion at hand. But I'd like to make an amendment to the motion, striking the two caveats, replacing with just generally surplusing the staff, having them come up with the best use case for that surplus that's within legal parameters. And then the second part of that, earmark for general fund dollars related to public. I don't want to go down to public safety. I don't want to earmark it so far down to public safety, but general fund dollars earmarked for a purpose that would have final approval by us. Sorry, go ahead. Well, is there a second? Hold on. So no second to that. We're back to the main motion. Comments?
Does it make sense to split this into two issues, vote on the issue tonight of whether we do it or not, and wait, and maybe collectively study on different avenues to spend the proceeds? Can we just do one tonight, do the rest another night?
Yeah, you can make a motion to strike portion of the current motion on the table if you'd like.
Okay, I will so move.
Okay, so we're striking the two parts of how we're surplusing it and where the money's going.
Right, we separate that into two separate issues, deal with the first issue at hand. I don't know if I'm making the motion correctly, but
Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead. Yeah,
I
Charlotte.
believe that's a motion to divide the question, to
I'm
vote
not
on.
familiar with that one.
yes,
Yeah. I think in this circumstance, it would be because the motion maker made, I think, both elements contingent on certain aspects. So it would have to be a motion to divide to first, to surplus with the caveat that it go to certain entities. And then the second half of the question would be, that the funds then are earmarked. That would be the division I could see there. There isn't you could also arguably divide it between motion to surplus and then the two caveats themselves being a separate motion.
that would
That's
be my
another-
preference.
Okay.
So there's been a motion to divide the question into three parts. Is there a second to that?
Into two parts, I believe the
Two
motion.
parts.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
I second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. The first part then, Charlotte, we will do the question of surplus.
Correct. So the first, first we need to vote on dividing the question. It's not debatable. So.
All right, all those in favor of dividing the question, please raise your hand. And opposed? All right, the question is now divided.
Okay. So then the first motion would be motion to surplus the structures. And then the second motion would be for the surplus to occur with designated recipients as outlined and the money being earmarked for homeless assistance.
Are we writing off the original motion of the faith and nonprofits by doing that, or is that included in the first question?
That's included in the second question, is
Okay.
my understanding of how the motion maker attempted to make it. So we've essentially lumped the amendment in the second question, and the original motion is the first. That appears to be how the motion maker wanted to divide the question.
All right.
I made the motion, I'm confused.
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah, go
as a
ahead.
seconder on the motion, which I still believe in, I want to make sure that we're clear on, we don't want, it's not, and if I get your intention, it's not that we are designating them to specific recipients, that we're giving preference to, that I think the heart of the motion was that, these funds were used in a certain way, and to honor that the innovation and time and effort and creativity and heart behind what was done with it, that we give preference first dibs or a weighted average on the bid, I suppose. Perhaps. Am I barking up the right tree, Mike? Because
Let me just kind of go through it. I never want perfect to becoming the enemy of the good.
Sure.
Okay. For me, the most important function is where are those funds going to end up, and do they honor, in essence, the efforts that were used to create that? Okay. If it turns out it's BHU, if it's HUD grant or some along those lines, I guess I kind of don't have that much of a druther one way or the other. But I think at some level, what I would kind of like it to see look like is I would feel much better about moving forward if I knew it was going to, in essence, in some fashion, aid the homeless in whatever way. I mean, I don't necessarily disagree with how you pitched it and how others have phrased it. That to me I'm not going to let perfect be the enemy of good. I still think, HU still good. I think that the idea of helping or a grant to, in essence, expand operations with a, emergency support shelter or just anything that basically, and we can create that as like a grant opportunity with a, perhaps as a housing element to it. but part of the reason I am just struggling with the notion of separating the surplus from the where the funds land is, for me, one is tied directly to the other. And if it is permissible, what I would prefer to say is we vote that in the event that Hope Village funds were, Hope Village was surplused, we would earmark those funds toward homelessness in some fashion. Again, we can be creative on that end. And I could get behind the support surplus in the units just way more. Again, and if we can do that second part first, I think that we would have maybe greater commitment for the first and feel better as a community about that first part. And again, I'm not going to say, as far as the dibs and that sort of thing, I would at least like to ascertain if there's any interest. If no interest, then I think that the idea is we probably should get the highest value from it as we possibly can, because it otherwise doesn't really support goal number 2. If that makes sense.
Let's have Charlotte weigh in here, and then we have some other hands. Did you have your hand up?
It was leftover hand, but I did want to clarify. So if the motion is to divide the question, and we are trying to, the original motion maker is sort of now asking for a division that allows for just the issue pertaining to earmarking the funds to be addressed first. It doesn't matter which order we choose to vote on the 2 divisions. We could separate them, the earmarking piece from the specific vendor piece. But I also did want to note that this motion this evening is just to direct staff to bring back legislation. So we'll do our best to draft whatever it is the council puts forward as a concept, but you can then play with sort of the specificity of these pieces. But as we mentioned before, we need to look at the legality of selecting certain vendors under your existing surplusing fund policy and under state law, because the standard is typically a commercially reasonable exchange, except where you're doing a governmental transfer.
I had Bryant as next, so then we'll go Kendall.
Seems like the motion a couple of weeks ago was a lot simpler. It seems like we were directing staff to go assess the property and see the value of it and what we could do with it. I value simplicity. I also value the deliberation of my distinguished colleague. He thinks in such a way that is very valuable to this council. And I remember being in presentation by Chief, and I discovered how valuable the deliberation process is for all of us. So I would value something leaning more towards the simplicity of valuing the property. We have the history of how we got to where we're at, where we're going, and then see what we can do with the funds after the fact. Not too far off of what's on the table, but I value simplicity, and it seems like in my head it's gotten a little complex.
I agree. Go ahead, Councilmember Kendall.
Yeah, and I'm not sure which one we're debating right now, actually, because we got 2, we had divided it into 2, and I'm not sure which half of it. But to the second half of it, as to what we do with if we decide to surplus it, what we do with the funds, I would like to suggest that we ask staff to bring back some options for us, and so that then we have a conversation after the fact of what kind of fund, what kind of revenue might we get from surplusing these, and then how could we utilize these to help aid in home, the continued effort with homelessness and poverty in our community. So, whether it's BHU, behavioral health, or the therapeutic court, or whatever piece of that, maybe they could come back, or with our interlocal agreement with Haswa, if they could come back with some suggestions or in some options for us, I think I would be comfortable with that.
Go ahead.
I believe we're all saying basically the same thing in essence. A little tiny disagreements here and there. My motion was basically to separate the two issues so we could spend tonight figuring out, are we going to do this or not? And basically table the second part of the discussion until we've had more input from staff or we've had time to percolate on what we can actually do intelligently with the proceeds. Let's give it a little time to try to figure out the best way to accommodate that. Let's concentrate tonight on, are we going to surplus them or not?
Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
In order to honor my colleague who put a lot of thought in this, it's kind of against the heart of his motion to divide them, to be perfectly clear. If we listen to what was said, and what I ascertained was that he was saying only his support is not entirely hinged, but it's very weighted. And what brought him to the table to be okay with, and I agree with agreeing to surplus, is the intention and use of the funds that are received. And so in dividing it, we're kind of going against the heart of what we had motioned and seconded, to be perfectly honest. And his ask to decide the second over the first is to get back to marrying the two, because he told us all, and why he made the motion is if we can direct them, guarantee that we direct them in funds that are addressing kind of the original intent of what Hope Village was going for, then he would support the surplusing, right? I want to be very sensitive to that, because that is exactly what he said. And that is exactly what I seconded, is that he wrestled with it and said, well, if we can guarantee, I'll support surplusing. And then we're dividing it. And where does the original motion lie? The heart is not there.
And that's my concern. I prefer to do that. If we're going to divide it, deal with the second one first. That gets me wholly on board on the second. And put it that way, Mayor Pro Tem Young has it exactly on the head. If you only do the first part, you strip out the heart of the motion in the first place.
Mayor Halverson.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. I love this council. I love the input that everybody brings, so I do appreciate that. When Camp Alabama was here, it was dark. It was dark time for our community, and then Hope Village came along. We were very blessed to get state and federal funding on that. I'm really proud of the work that city has done, the goals and objectives that the past council and this council has, and to not only help the displaced, not just homeless, but those that maybe suffer from mental illness. And our goal was to get to a place where we could say, Hope Village is closed. We don't have that need as great as we did before. I think our community, in a sense, is much happier with the fact that they could go into city parks, the gazebo, etc. In regards to Chief Huda and the staff, BHU, Casey, everyone, they did find places for the ones that were still in Hope Village. And so they did their part. And I think our community has gained in a loving way that we were able to help and serve those. But there was also some pain, too, along this way of focusing on a group in which some, maybe a couple of dozen, didn't want the help. They weren't seeking help, didn't want help. So if that's the group that you're thinking that we should still help and guide, the other thing I want to say is we are a community of thousands of nonprofits and churches. Their mission is what you're wanting. Is it the government's responsibility to continue to help and serve everyone in every sector for every need? Is it our responsibility? I think that we have to be very clear that we asked the staff to come back 6 months later when we said, we're going to close it, put a hiatus, come back 6 months later. And they did. Great reports from the professionals in our community and our city, as well as nonprofits, churches. Diane Cooper even came and spoke highly of it. So when I think about this, I look to Chief Huda, I look to Jen and Chris and other people in this community. Do they feel that there was a need to reopen it? No. And if, some of you say, well, I'm going to vote based on recommendation of staff. The staff has recommended for us to move forward on this. We are now asking our legal team and staff to go back to the drawing board. What are the legalities of selling to local? Which nonprofit can, what can't? We are just continuing the cycle. We've done our part and we will continue. But is it our mission as a government, or is it churches and nonprofits that is their true mission? I feel very strongly what you had said about, we have set an example to other cities in the state, and you're right. And they're following our lead. No camping in the parks, having fines for certain things that are illegal. We are setting an example of how a city should run, and I'm proud of it. We will never turn our back on those that are displaced or need assistance. That's why we invest so much in safety and BHU. I think it's wrong that the whole city was impacted by Camp Alabama and Hope Village, but we want to give those funds back to a sector. We all gave, whether it be food or time or effort or voting, we gave that. And for us to be able to say to the other 40,000 residents, any money we get from there, we're going to give it to this group. When really it should just be a grant, like a CDGB grant. Here's the funds we got from Hope Village. People can apply for it that helps serve maybe the mentally ill or homeless. Let them apply for it and let them seek their mission to serve and to help. But at what point is it not government's responsibility? The other thing I would like to say also, when Councilwoman Kendall talked again about RFP, we did that. People had the chance to come and submit RFPs. We got one. So to reopen that again, we're talking about, we're going into a budget season. We have so much going on right now. And though this is very important, I am also a woman of faith, as you are a man of faith. But at what point do we, as elected officials, our role is government decisions for the better of the whole city, not a small group or sector. So I just want to make sure that we're understanding that we are the voice of 40,000, not a handful. I am proud of the decisions that were made in this last year or two. Look how beautiful our city is now. People aren't complaining like they were. And it's not that we don't care about the homeless. We cared. This team found homes for everybody in Hope Village. That was like every one of them. So it's not like we haven't done anything. We've held people accountable. We've supported BHU and Chief Huda and his team. So I spoke with a lot of people about the recommendation of Hope Village. Some are in this room and some are not. And every one of them said it is time to let it go. We will find other ways to help and serve, as we have with BHU. But when people in this room that are leaders say, this is my recommendation, I'm going to go with that. And I'm going to go with that because they're the ones out in the field dealing with it. We've been here now for over 2 years and been through it. And I just think it's time. Am I able to make an amendment to the motion? At what point can I?
Well, I'm in uncharted territory. I don't know, is amendment higher? Can they go higher status than where we are, Charlotte?
I think we have to vote on the divided amendment before we can move forward. I think that is. I think what I'm hearing from the councilwoman is a call to the question to just simply move forward past the amendments. But we are in uncharted territory here a bit when it comes to Robert's rules.
All right. Can I say a little bit? Yes. So as far as earmarking funds today or even before they're surplus, I feel that might be out of order, just because we don't know how much proceeds we might receive and how wide we can spread that out. So I wonder if, and I'm not going to make an amendment just to make an amendment, but is there appetite that whatever proceeds come out of it, it's earmarked for council to decide how those are
Yeah.
funded at that time? Would that be amendable?
Yes.
Well, I'm assuming you can do whatever you want. I'm just gonna say I'm uncomfortable with that notion. But, you know, I guess you do what you do. The reason I kind of go back to it is, for me, I'm not asking that Hope Village be continued. I think clearly I have said it is probably time to bring it down to a close. Number two, I recognize that there is still some issue with homelessness, and they're not all bad people. And in terms of how we do that, I'm totally comfortable with the comments made by Mayor Halverson and Mayor Pro Tem Young as to, in essence, not something that we decide today, but we are giving direction to council as to where those funds land up. I'm not insisting on perfection. I will accept good. And as far as I'm concerned, if we're going in that particular direction and give that instruction, that's good enough for me. But when I talk about if we're dividing this motion and we're going to vote to surplus first, I want to make clear that I am voting no. And the reason I would vote on the second one yes is if the second one passes, we know where it's going to go. I will vote yes on the surplus. Because at the end of the day, the way I kind of look at it is, again, we are still dealing with a homeless issue. I've always kind of hated, as we kind of talked over it about the last couple of years, that's a crisis. It's somehow, you know, hair on fire kind of moment. I think we've moved beyond that. I think we're in a way better place today. But my reaction is that if we had something that basically looked, if we did that second part first, along the lines of what you were talking about, and the second part, with Chair Pro Tem, I'd be happy with it. As far as the first part, motioning for, you know, in terms of surplus and giving, you know, religious organizations, again, I am not insisting on perfection. Okay? If it's possible and it generates a good, solid return, great. But I do not object to your notion that if there are other communities that could use it, and I'm not, as you point out, I don't want to sell them one at a time. Okay, it just doesn't make any sense to do it that way. You surplus them in the way that you can get the maximum value, because in essence, it goes back to the original goal. And so I'm comfortable with that. And that's the reason why I'm saying I can let go. I'm ready to let go. I think the city is ready to let go. But I think that we do stop to recognize that there is still some homelessness that we can address through whatever means that we agree to by consensus. And that's why I don't mean to overly complicate it, but you do have to understand these two are very important to me to tie the two together. I feel better about the second one. If the second one passes, I feel so much better than about the surplus.
100%.
Let's go Nichols, then Charlotte.
I'm sensitive to what Councilmember Claxton says. I tend to concur. My issue with it is there are dozens of options what we could do with the proceeds of that. And to try to deal with all those tonight and narrow that down to a button, we'd be here for 2 days. My motion was to separate it so that we could decide, yes, we're going to do that, and then give us some time to explore all those various options. I tend to agree with Mr. Claxton. I would like to see proceeds go somehow to help the homeless issue, because that's where it was generated. Whether that's Hoswa or there's various avenues we can explore with that. But to try to wrestle with that tonight before we decide that we're even going to do it, I think we're putting the cart in front of the horse.
Attorney Archer?
Apologies. I believe to divide the question, I think each aspect of the question has to stand alone. So I think the original division was improper. The division should have been between the two elements, one being of the amendment, one being to earmark the funds for a specific purpose, and then the separate to ensure that the surplus goes to specific entities first. They're given the first opportunity. So at this point, if the council wants to proceed with the amendment, which we have to, I would suggest taking a vote up or down on those two things in sequence. And then we will go back to the main motion as potentially amended.
Can
Can we restate the amendment, please?
So the amendment,
are we good to close debate?
yes, absolutely. Oh, sorry. You're not asking
Do
me.
I need a motion for that? Is everyone done debating? Sorry.
I just have one more comment,
Okay.
if that's okay. I think we're all kind of in the agreement of moving forward, having staff to surplus, and I wonder if this is a compromise. So I do feel that's fine I feel like it should go into the general fund to the whole community, but if in fact it's to be earmarked or designated to serve those, I don't know if I would say homeless, but maybe homeless, mental illness, wouldn't it just be easier for us to say to take those funds, put them in a separate line item, and allow churches or nonprofits to apply for that funding to serve that particular group and sector?
I think you guys might be saying the same thing.
I mean, but that's
I think we are.
Yeah.
I think we are.
All right. I'd like to. Is it a motion to end debate, Charlotte, or is it
No,
a call to question? Or
you as chair can do that if there's consensus. Yeah.
everyone's all right with that? All right. So the first question, Charlotte, help me out.
The first question was an amendment to the original motion, and the original motion is to surplus or to direct staff to bring back legislation to surplus. The amendment then had two parts. The first part that we will be voting on is for the proceeds of any surplus to be earmarked by this council to assist the unhoused community.
All right. That is the question. All those in favor, please raise. Sorry.
Just unhoused, or is it those with possible mental illness?
Well, that will ultimately be up to us at a future date how it's spent. Yeah.
Yeah.
So all those in favor of the first question, please raise your hand. That one carries. Second question, please, Attorney Archer.
So the surplus then would, the process, we would prioritize the transfer of those, the surplus goods to a local agency or a community organization of a religious or social nature who assists the unhoused community in the city of Longview. That would be our first step in the process. If we were unable to do that, then we would revert back to a commercially reasonable standard, subject to legal review.
So if this fails, is there an opportunity to make someone else to make an? That's it. Then all the motions are satisfied.
Correct. Then we would revert back to the original motion as amended by the one that did pass.
Okay. I closed debate, but did you? Okay, go ahead.
Charlotte, clarifying question. So local nonprofit, local religious wouldn't be able to operate without an emergency declaration, correct? As the city as well. So if we were to surplus it to someone locally, we would still have legislation as a council to do that.
Your question has a lot of legal risk analysis embedded in it, and so that would be part of the legal analysis that we would provide prior to returning the legislation. The motion from the council is mechanical in nature to
Perfect.
Surplus and try first to transfer or sell to a local organization. your question gets to whether that organization can legally use these for any particular purpose. So that's why that's a tough question to
Okay,
answer.
perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I'm confused. What are we voting on?
so what we'll be voting on is directing staff to come back with a resolution that is surplusing these units, but has a first dibs or is there interest, and this is assuming it's legal, for these faith-based and nonprofits locally. So everyone's clear on that question. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And opposed? That motion carries. I believe all. So now we're to the main motion?
Now we're to the main motion as amended. Yeah. So a surplus with all those caveats baked in. Yeah.
Okay. So the main motion as amended is direct staff to bring back a resolution that surpluses the units at Hope Village with first dibs, if legal, to local nonprofits and or religious organizations, with the proceeds being earmarked by council to homeless related funding sources. All those in favor of that main motion, please raise your hand. And those opposed? And that motion carries. Thank you guys for stepping through that. That was quite an exercise.